Welcome back. Today we're going to do a quick one on CCA Trio. So of course this is the new legendary 3 dynamic drivers. It's actually 3 8mm dynamic drivers put out by CCA right before the Chinese Lunar New Year. So for those of you who ordered, some of them shipped out, some of them are going to be delayed because of the holiday, but here it is. And I think up close it's quite attractive, and I already kind of showed this. And what people are looking for is can you actually see all 3 dynamic drivers in there? And you really can't, because they put a bracket, that black thing kind of right there is actually the bracket, and that's holding 2 other 8mm dynamic drivers behind the one that you can actually see. So I think you can see one peeking out right there, but can't really get a good look at it. If they could pull out the faceplate, you get a better look at it. This one, of course, does have the 4 switches, and I wouldn't say that the 4 switches do as much as it did on other sets. It's the 8mm has some characteristics that the switches will do something, but not as much as some of the other sets. And I won't talk too much about the switches for that reason. They definitely try them, but I wouldn't rely on them too much for changing it. So other cool thing about having 3 dynamic drivers and a lot of magnets is these 2 are will repel and attract each other just like magnets do. You don't see that too often. Sometimes you feel 2 shells that attract each other. On these, you could actually move them around without getting all that close to each other. So cool stuff going on there. Some non-sound cool things you could do with your IEMs if you're bored on your desk. So let's quickly walk through the graph, and I will kind of talk about what's new and what's similar to the other sets. And I picked these 3 because they all have a very similar. This is sort of what KZ's house sound has turned into in kind of the recent times. And by recent times, in the past month or 2, that's kind of KZ recent times. So Trio is in the blue, Caster is in the green, and Rhapsody is in the red. So I think the first question people were asking when they looked at Trio, and you see that the bass curve is actually very close to Caster, is it a big bass banging set like Caster? And the answer is no, because of the 8mm driver. So we kind of talk about the same things with 8mm or 6mm. They tend to have a really big bass curve, but in your ear they don't have that much impact. They don't move as much air. They don't have as much depth as a 10mm. Exactly what happens here. So yes, it is a big bass curve, and it looks like, and even if you flip the switch, it looks like it's even, up there with Caster. But in your ear, it's not nearly as impactful or as deep or as hard hitting as Caster is. It kind of falls more where Rhapsody kind of lies. If you can imagine this blue line being an 8mm version of the graph, is probably pretty close to where Caster is. And I'll say the same thing on the kind of this bleed into the mids, and looking how warm it looks, it's actually not like that, because the level is actually a little bit closer down to where Rhapsody is, and this transition definitely sounds more like Rhapsody. It sounds more U-shaped to me going into the mids. And I'll say the mids again, this is sort of where I think this part maybe is more Caster-ish, and kind of part, at least there is a punch to the bass, and if you hit it in the right spot, I think that part does resemble Caster. It's just not at the Caster level. But as you get into the mids and you get into the treble, definitely it takes on more of a Rhapsody sound to it, where that style of tuning where they fix some of the bits that people were complaining about on Caster, that little peak there, some of the peaks over here, that little bit of harshness, and there's kind of an off-putting bit to Caster's treble that people picked up on, and Rhapsody really fixed that. And then again, you see this fixed in Trio as well. So all the way from here, all the way out through treble, I would say very much more in line with where Rhapsody is. But Rhapsody, that's a beast of a set. That's 2 dynamic drivers, 4 BAs. You're not going to get that resolution. You're not going to get those technicals on even 3 dynamic drivers on Trio. So I will say the levels are similar, but if you're looking for a set that is more resolving, it's still going to be Rhapsody. Rhapsody is still a very, very nice hybrid. Trio is kind of this middle ground between what Caster did. You had the big bass on Caster, the mids were okay, the treble on Caster was not so good. So now you're getting sort of a not as big of a bass set with Trio, but better mids and better treble, and that will appear. And maybe that was closer to Caster, the standard version, but as far as the bass version, the only one I've heard I do think that Trio sort of smoothed everything out. It doesn't have the big bass that people were looking for. If you were looking for a caster replacement, I mean, it's not going to be Trio. Trio has a nice bump there, but not like caster. But the rest of it, as far as an everyday carry set that's more general appealing and still fun, that is very much where Trio is. And Rhapsody is still going to be your high-end, kind of a hybrid set that's kind of beyond both of them in that respect. So let's kind of walk through some of these notes really quickly and see what I missed. So what is it? $40, 3 dynamic drivers. I talked about this. It's definitely more like a Caster and Rhapsody mix. It takes bits of both of them. Caster still owns the bass, in my opinion. I think there is, if nice mid-bass slam is your primary concern, I think Caster is still that one. Trio isn't far behind, but it doesn't have that level. It's that 10mm versus 8mm like I talked about. So is Caster better? And I would say no, because the rest is really closer to Rhapsody, and that harsh, slight, overdriven 5K that people complain about on Caster, you don't get that on Trio. Really closer towards Rhapsody. So is it better than Rhapsody? And again, I would say no, it's not better than Rhapsody. Rhapsody is still that beast with 2 dynamic drivers, 4 BAs. That's probably going to always beat out 3 8mm dynamic drivers. Some people will always be into having an all dynamic driver set, and that's fine too. But kind of at the technical level, I would still say that Rhapsody is really hard to beat for what they did for that amount of money. As I said, it took a bit from the both. It still has a heavier bass slam from Caster. It doesn't have as much, but not that sharp, harsher treble from Caster. That's more like Rhapsody. If you are a stage person, that was one bit that they really got wrong on Caster. Trio is now properly spaced, where Caster was mostly cramped. It kind of blew the stage on Caster. It's a weird one, and I'll talk about it when we get down to it. So sound-wise, KZ finds a UV-shaped tuning that these 3 sets and successfully adapted to 3 different driver packages, and you end up with a similar but not quite the same sets, right? So we kind of look at this curve and you see this kind of a very similar pattern across all 3 sets, and this has sort of become a refined version of where KZ started out with almost DFI. So I think they are zoning in, refining it. They're getting it to work with more drivers, more configurations. They're probably onto something that is going to be around for a while and general appealing. But a long time ago, I literally talked about this. I said KZ needs to find their flavor of Harman-like tuning, because that target didn't really work for them. It's almost too lean for what KZ's audience prefers. They tended to do weird things to it and made it too lean, too thin, and then they would call it audiophile, and it wasn't all that pleasant to listen to. And then they sort of hit this mark with Caster, and you get this bigger bass version. That was probably a little bit too much. So now with Rhapsody and Trio, you see them kind of roll it back into a very general appealing, fun sound. 3 versions of a similar target, but still very general appealing on all 3, and just fun levels. And I do think they have almost found their way into a target that works for them, and it's more modern than their older target. So the bass, do think of that in terms of 8mm, like I talked about. Still has the punch, but not the depth of Caster. It comes across as more balanced, kind of more in that Rhapsody way in that respect, where Caster was really heavy in that bump. This one is kind of heavy-ish in the bump, but not quite like Caster. Definitely, to me, it still sounds a little bit more U-shaped, and it drops into the mids. Again, think of that 8mm level as opposed to what the 10mm would sound like on the same graph. 8mm sounds way lower than what the 10mm would. And the mids, and this one is where you start to notice that it's not Rhapsody. Sounds more dynamic driver-like. It doesn't have the technicals that the BA does on Rhapsody. But like any set, some people are always going to be naturally gravitate towards dynamic drivers, and I understand that. And that's just the way it is, and I understand it. I think that's a brilliant move if that's how your ear loves to hear sound, and that's what sounds more natural to you. This one will sound more natural to you in that respect. Less peaky than Caster in that upper mids, and I think they kind of tended to get harsh on Caster, and they kind of got rid of all that in Trio. I think the resolution and detail is okay on this one, even with 3 dynamic drivers. There's just a trade-off there where Trio sounds a little smoother and it still has some detail, but it's not like Rhapsody where you had BA resolution and still had some BA timbre of a hybrid. And that's sort of a trade-off where you're getting more technical ability, capability, with more drivers, but there was, a side effect to it, and this is, you're not quite getting that level of resolution and detail, but you're getting it in dynamic driver, and again, that's going to be way more appealing to most people. So Treble, again, this is probably where they borrowed from Rhapsody, kind of between having dynamic drivers only and the refined tuning from Rhapsody. It sounds end-to-end better, and Caster is still fun. If you love that big bass, it is a very fun set, but end-to-end Trio is actually a better set. There's just less problems end-to-end. Most noticeable is the treble balance, especially where Caster bass was fun, but the treble really irked you, and there's a lot of people who where the treble was kind of irksome to people who own Caster. All of that kind of goes away with Trio, but it's that trade-off, right? You're not going to get the Caster bass, but you're getting everything else is better. So I know I've said that about 20 times, but true. You're kind of going to get close on the bass, but it's not Caster bass. But everything else I think is actually better than Caster, except for you bass fans. And stage, yes, I think KZ has gotten this right lately on lots of sets. Caster was an outlier. The stage wasn't all that good on Caster. If you listen to the treble on Caster, the stage was kind of really cramped and overlapping, and it sort of emphasized this harshness and this overlapping, and it was kind of intense and bothersome to a lot of people, including me. So Trio again kind of fixed that bit, and this one sounds, everything is spread out as it should be, kind of more in line where other recent KZ and CCA sets are. So that was a quick one on Trio, so thank you guys again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.